past is so beautiful. It's created who you are, but it also gives you the wisdom to decide here and now, who do you want to be as well? And if there's nothing to, I also find there's nothing to overcome, there's nothing to become. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have challenges in life, if you don't have obstacles that present themselves, like the triggers that you mentioned before, then there's nothing to discover. Because if we get an emotional response from something, we get reactive to something. Love that. That's so beautiful, because it's teaching you something that you haven't learned yet. Any kind of fuzzies in the body where you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It's like, cool, lean into that. What do you want to learn from this? What do you want to lean into? And make a decision.
Before you listen to today's episode, I'd like to ask you a huge favor. So many of you listen to this podcast, but you're not yet subscribed, potentially on any platform. The more of you that subscribe and share this with your friends, the more that we can bring more content to you, more knowledge and wisdom and amazing guests. And right now, this is my passion project. So I'm not making any money from it. And it does take a lot of my time amidst supporting my incredible clients inside the lovely Radical Academy. And I get so many messages of lives that are being changed because of having access to this exciting knowledge and support and conversation and community. And by simply clicking a button to subscribe and to share, you're part of that impact, which is pretty cool. So take a moment now, hit subscribe, share this with your friends, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. So she is one of the co-founders of the Sisterhood Movement on the Gold Coast, which is a space for women to grow, train, and learn together in a safe space. She's also a breathwork and meditation facilitator and coaches and mentors in identity and helping women unpack their truth. Laura, welcome to the show.
Hello. It's so exciting to be here. I've been watching you for a while. So to be asked to be on this morning, it was an absolute yes. And I'm really excited to see where this conversation flows.
Yes, and you're just off the back of a weekend away at retreat of one of your own. So I'm very excited to bring that energy in.
I know, it's like you think you know something and then you go on a retreat and you're like, oh, there's like this whole other side of the fence that you've just jumped over. So yes, I'm feeling really good today.
Love it. So tell us a little bit about your, I like to call it the origin story, or did you have a life before your self-development journey, and how did you find your way from there to now?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question, Kat. Thank you so much. And it's so interesting also to have someone read your bio back to you. You're like, oh yeah, that is me. Actually, those are the things that I do. Yeah. But it's crazy. It feels like I've lived so many lives within a life. And to pinpoint maybe some of the significant moments that have led me to expansion or led to like deeper understandings of life. I grew up in Melbourne for 18 years and I went through probably the whole 18 years there, to be honest, of self-discovery and real resistance to life. I actually wasn't really enjoying life for a majority of the time that I was down there. On the cover, like on the mask that I was wearing, it looks like I was this very happy, go lucky, positive person. But underneath, I was like that duck, like the feet were just going constantly. And I just felt myself in flight or fight state a lot without awareness of what that actually meant though at the time. So I was running mainly as a retail manager down there, whilst also running a fashion business online. And it's nearly like my identity and my persona just wanted to chase success or chase the doingness of life and the busyness of life and the chaos of life, because it took me away from actually looking at what was happening beneath the surface. And yeah, I just found myself like not eating a lot. My health was terrible. I was in and out of relationships, blaming the world a lot of the time for why things weren't going the way that I probably deeply wanted them to go. A lot of victim mindset. And one of my girlfriends actually passed me a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers when I was probably 21. And that was like one of the first callings, I'd call it. You know, you have the whispers and then you have the loud call, and it's like the epiphany moment of, hey, this is giving me a permission piece to do something differently. And I read this book, and the first thing that came up for me was, I really need to go traveling, and I actually need to separate myself from this life that I've created here in this busyness and this chaos. to actually go and find myself. And I used to really like not understand that term. I was like, what do you mean you find yourself? You are yourself. But it's really taking off what you're pretending to be into what is actually true for you. And when I moved overseas, initially I intended to go overseas for about 3 months. I was on a 2-year visa. And I thought, yeah, I didn't even tell people I was going because I'm like, I'll see them again in a couple of months. No big deal. I was convinced that was the case. And it's really interesting, Kat, like when I jumped on the flight to go over there, packed the night before, wasn't really thinking much into it. I got on the plane and it was like the first time that I felt a sense of serenity in myself. It's nearly like jumping onto that plane and coming up onto, above the world, what feels like when you're flying, that I actually removed all the layers and all the things that I had attached to and all the things that I was solely focusing on in Melbourne to actually be by myself in this space of, wow, I'm actually about to go on this new pathway, this new adventure to discover myself. And those 2.5 years of travel, so I lasted a lot longer than 3 months. I had, it was great. I had no agenda. I had no set plan. I just fully surrendered to life. And I just went on this magical, magic ride through time and space and places and people. And that really led me to what I do now. And that really led me to finding myself, my own identity through what I was learning through others, definitely, but also through the environments I was in, through meeting different cultures and going to different continents across the globe, trying different things, working in different jobs, not working at all, what that felt like to not have a job as well. And it felt like I was really dancing between polarities of life and really identifying what has truth and substance and meaning to me through my own decision making before I came back and started to teach on identity, coaching on identity, coached accountability for 5 years, kind of stepped back into a masculine time frame of my life, which was what it needed to be, and then started working with a beautiful man called Dr. Espen that taught me more about spirituality and femininity. And that felt like I was dancing in polarities again to come to a place where honestly I have ideas of what my beliefs and my identity is now, but the excitement of it is I don't get so attached to my opinions or the ways that I view the world because I know they're all subject to change.
Yeah.
And so what I love about what I do now in coaching women and running sisterhood is I always frame everything as this is my opinion, take what you want from it, but learn about yourself through the journey. And I just have found through my own experience and what I do now so much beauty when women actually let go of this attachment to this is how they think they should be, or this is how they've told they need to be, to who do you actually want to be? Like, this is your choice. There are parts of you that are intuitive and feel very true and you don't need to change, but there are other parts where we hold on to so tightly that actually don't serve us, but we just don't know how to let go. And so yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and that's a very short version of it's like what's your life, where did it start and how did you become here? And that's like a very surface level part of it, but it's been a magical experience, and I find myself learning through so many people as well. I think I know something and then someone gives me a different perspective and I'm like, oh wow.
And it's like peeling back those layers. And I love that happened for you through traveling. It was very similar for myself as well. And then you mentioned like it was partially what you learned about yourself by doing different things, but also through people. And we can get so stuck in an identity, whether it's ours or what was passed on to us because of just the environments that we're in. And I remember when I went, did I'm taking off traveling a few times. And it definitely was fight or flight. And it definitely was maybe like running away. And it was also running towards, because there was like,
thank you.
Yeah, it's like an opportunity. Like, yes, maybe I was running away, but like I was also running towards, well, I've got to change my state, change my environment if I'm going to become a different version of myself that doesn't keep attracting what just happened.
100%, Kat. I love that you just shared that, because everybody before I left, and I'd love to know if you had this response as well, was you're running away. You've just built this whole life. You know, I was in my career for 5 years and I was about to be promoted and all these things were happening. And I just let it all go. And they're like, you're running away. I'm like, I'm running towards, I'm actually going to discover something. So I don't know if that was the case for you.
Oh, it was like full body intuition stuff that was happening, and probably just fueled by a little bit of fight or flight.
Yeah, sure. I totally resonate with that.
Yeah. But it was like, well,
Yeah.
what do I want? Like, that was the question that was, again, without me knowing I was doing the identity work, it was like, the question that I was asking was, well, what am I going to do? What do I want to do if I'm not going to be going on that path that I thought I was going to be going on? And then when you ask the mind those questions, like, things drop in and you go, oh, like you said about people's opinions and stuff, it's like, oh, I wonder about that or that or that.
Totally.
Instead of just being in this box life. So I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that you teach identity, and it's so inside my academies, it's pillar 1. It's where we start, because I say, like, we can decide and we can design that identity from scratch all the time. Like, we're always going to be evolving and peeling back layers and adding new things in. And I know that people can come to me and tell me their story of past pain or problems so well.
Yeah.
But they rarely can tell me the story of their dreams and their vision and what they want to become.
Absolutely.
It's like a one word. It's like, I want peace or I want happiness. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So talk to me about the concept of identity. What does it mean for you?
Oh, I love this topic of conversation so much. And yeah, I knew this was something that you coached on, but I didn't understand the level that you went to within your, like, how you do one-on-ones and things as well. So I'm excited to hear what your view of this is as well, because I always learn through others. Yeah. And what's been so beautiful is something that I've actually realized just on the weekend away that keeps kind of coming up is really navigating identity from a state of your past is your past, it's your lessons, it's your learnings. The wisdom comes in the present moment. The wisdom is, what did you take from the past? Because your subconscious mind is absorbing all the information from what you see, what you hear, who you meet, what you're learning, what you're teaching others as well, the paths you're walking. And we're taking that and it's stored in the brain. And it's like, what part of that do you want to tap into to create the here and the now? And in the here and the now, if we just observe, we can start to dictate the trajectory of our future. So in this present moment, what do you decide? And I think in the healing world, in the personal development space, and this is definitely a me opinion, so for anyone listening, take what you want from this, but I find we spend so much time trying to unwire or rewrite the past, opposed to just making conscious decisions, because they're scary sometimes. And sometimes to avoid the fear, we dance so much into the past of recreating these stories or trying to understand these stories. But something that's really helped me more recently, having a little bit more maybe awareness of some things, is that I can just decide in a moment what I want to shift and what I want to change, and then I can back that with action. And I think when we look at the form of identity and how identity is created, is it's created from our thoughts, it's created from our emotions, which is energy and motion through our body. It's also the actions we choose to take from that energy of, if we're feeling a certain way, what do we want to do with that? What's the action? What's the behavior? That's action is just, behaviors are repeated action over time. That's consistently done. And that creates our identity, our personality, our beliefs, and our values. But you can also look at it the other way. You can decide a value today, make a decision, and then also have an emotional experience from that. So I feel like something that has helped me really navigate identity in myself and with women is making decisions. And it's choosing, like, how do I want to feel? What does that look like for me? How do I want to create that? And going from there. So it's like this beautiful cycle that you can go left or you can go right. It's all intertwined. Like, I find we can't really say that, yeah, I'm just so emotional and I'm this and I'm that. And it's like, yeah, that may be true, but you also have logic. You also have other components that will definitely be influencing that emotion, and it will be driving that as well. And the same with thoughts. It's like, yes, we have thoughts. We're in control of our thoughts most of the time. And emotions and the chemical reaction that's going on in your body is also going to dictate the thoughts. So I feel like it's nearly ignorant of us to look at one component. We actually need to look at the whole piece. And over the weekend, one of the main processes we did with the beautiful community was based on value systems. So that was where we started, but it all came into the stories we created. It came into the attachments we had. It came into, you know, our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, the paths we've walked, the people that have told us things that we've attached to that maybe don't serve us anymore. And so I feel like when we look at these different layers and go up and you can go right, whichever way you want to look at it, it's multifaceted and multidimensional, but it all plays into the creation that is us. And the creation that is us is a soul expression. And our soul expression, there are going to be things that feel so known and intuitive to us. And there are going to be things that we just thought to be true. And then we meet someone down the street, or, you know, someone new comes into our world, gives us a different perspective. And all of a sudden in that moment, we change. And the beauty of identity is exactly what you said before. It's like we get to decide and we get to choose. The only thing we're guaranteed in this world is the subject to change. Like everything is subject to change. Nothing really stays the same. And I actually find a lot of beauty in that. I used to find a lot of fear in that. And now I find through discovery and being curious about life and wanting to explore and wanting to adventure through life and be open-minded to other people's perspectives, opinions, life experiences, we can really take that as if life was a buffet and we choose, hey, I like this piece, I want to try this on. Hey, I like this piece, I want to try this on. And something that I woke up this morning and was thinking is that, yes, I believe in polarity, but I also believe that we dance in polarities to have this experience and that experience. We have what we would define at the time as left or right or white or dark, or, you know, whatever it is that you identify the polarity as. But I've actually found a lot of peace dancing in the middle. And in the middle, I only find the middle ground when I've actually experienced both. And so when I try to resist the left or the right, and I don't want to feel it or I'm avoiding it, I actually don't come to harmony and I don't come to peace within myself. And yeah, it was something we spoke to the girls a lot about, but they're like, oh, but I can't experience this over here because of this. I'm like, well, just be curious about it. You know, and if you come from a state of curiosity, you come from a creative state chemically in your body, in your mind, in your soul, in your emotions, and we don't identify things as good or bad. We're just curious about them. So long-winded answer to your question. We can go on about that for so long.
Yeah, but it's fantastic because, like you said, there's so many facets to it and ways that we could go at it. And I love that you talked about that presence, because what I say around identity is decide and design. It's decide in this moment something new, something different. Like, because up until this point, we've made decisions that I am this way because of this. It's like, well, did you actually decide that? Or is that just happened unconsciously? You get to make some new decisions, and designing is, where do you want to go? What do you want to add in? What do you want to experience? And usually in those two actions is the resistance that comes up. And that's maybe where I'm the same page. Like, we don't need to go into the past. We don't need to drudge it all up all the time. However, if it's being presented as resistance to us deciding new things and designing new life, cool. What is that? Why has that come up right now? Because it's all, like, I truly believe that our lessons and challenges and triggers and whatever you want to call them come to the surface when we're ready to face off with them. 100%. And they're like the pathway to the design that we're creating.
Totally.
Like, if I'm making decisions that are new and different and things are coming up, it's like, oh, I'm not that person who has the design of the new life yet. But as I learn and choose to decide to learn and grow from maybe some things in the past, then I actually become the person who receives the improved life.
Absolutely.
And in that builds confidence, right?
Yeah. And that's not, and I completely agree with you. And it's not to like diminish people's past as well, because some people hear that and they go, what do you mean my past isn't important? I'm like, it's so important, but you don't have to dance there for so long. Like,
or constantly be trying to find what you did wrong or the trauma, or like what happened when you were 5. Like, there's probably a million things that happened when you were 5.
100%. And I only say that. I only say that because I did this. Like, I spent so many years unpacking my past, and I was like, oh my God, this is so exhausting. I was like, why do I feel so depressed and like so unbalanced in my life? And it's like, because I wasn't living here and now. So the past is so beautiful. It's created who you are. but it also gives you the wisdom to decide here and now, who do you want to be as well? And if there's nothing to, I also find this, there's nothing to overcome, there's nothing to become. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have challenges in life, if you don't have obstacles that present themselves, like the triggers that you mentioned before, then there's nothing to discover. Because if we get an emotional response from something, we get reactive to something. Love that. That's so beautiful, because it's teaching you something that you haven't learned yet. Anything that causes like, you know, incoherence, or that's not the right word, but any kind of like fuzzies in the body.
Yeah.
The word's not coming to me, but any kind of fuzzies in the body where you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It's like, cool, lean into that. What do you want to learn from this? What do you want to lean into? And make a decision, opposed to like unpacking and unraveling all that time. So yeah, I love that you have that mindset as well around it. It's probably because we've spent lots of time, you know, delving into attachments we've had to our past.
Yeah, exactly. And that was it. It was many, many years until I got to the work that we do and the awareness that I have now about how to flip it. Of every time there was a trigger or a challenge, I was like, cool, I'm leaning into it, but I'm looking into the past, going, okay, what else do I have to heal? What is wrong with me that I'm creating? But it's like nothing wrong with us. It's like you said, it's an opportunity. It's a human experience that we get to have. And then I guess the polarity gets to come in, the opportunity to integrate the like light and the dark, to come into that middle zone, right? And there's a lot, I see it a lot in, you know, the spiritual world, the self-development world of, you know, okay, you've got more healing to do. You just don't feel good enough yet. Like, oh my God, I can't believe how many times I was told, well, you just must not feel good enough yet. Or you just you must still feel unworthy. And I'm like, that's not it. After 10 years of doing work on yourself, it's like,
why am I not there yet? It's like,
why do I not feel good yet?
And I wonder like how that language affects us too. Like, we had this beautiful experience with one of the women over the weekend, and we were going through value systems. And I said, you know, like we went through a whole series of questions to come into like, what do you really value? And this beautiful woman was sharing, we're just in such awe of who she is and just absolutely adore her. And her number one value was healing. And I just found that really curious. And it actually made me feel a little bit sad, because I thought, you're chasing to be healed. What subconsciously is going on in your mindset there that is potentially telling you you're broken? If there's something to heal, then what is broken? And she had this beautiful epiphany moment and said, no, like, I don't actually desire to heal. I'm completely perfect and fine and amazing in this exact moment. I don't have to keep trying to heal all of these things. I'm not broken. And I just find it so beautiful, because me too, I just wanted to keep healing and like be more worthy and be more
journey.
this. And, I'm like, definitely dig into the past to find why the subconscious mind is attached to a certain theory or story it's created, and then rewrite it and then shift it. Because you just get to decide in the moment and you just follow through. And I'm making that sound really easy. I'm not saying that the action and the things that follow that aren't challenging, but isn't life meant to be that way? Isn't that where we create strength and bravery, and then things become easier, and then we go to different levels? Exactly. So love that.
I love that you brought that up, because it's become a real buzzword in the industries that we're in, to heal and to be healing, and yet we're not broken.
Yay!
Learning and I like it. I liken it a lot to like, we're living in peacetime. We're living in the most like chill time to be a human ever. Like, we have everything at our fingertips. There's no one has to go to war. No one is like in famine or living off food rations. Like, we have so much, but our war of our generation, our battle, is to actually realize that all the stuff's coming to the surface that our parents and their parents and their parents couldn't deal with, couldn't look at, couldn't face, because they just had to keep going. And like, in a way, that's our service. That's our sacrifice. That's our work in this beautiful environment where we can click and get our food and click and get all these things that we need to support us and make us feel kind of great along the journey. We get to go to battle with the things that we don't want to bring forth to the next generations. And so for those who are in in it at the moment, because we've obviously come through many, many years of healing, if you would have it that way. If someone's in it right now, maybe this is your battle. Maybe you're on the front lines, and who are you going to get to come fight the war with you? Are you going to get some better troops around you than what you have? Like, start taking action to really take it seriously, because on the other side of the battle is the peace. I think I say it all the time. David Goggins said that when you go to war with yourself, you find an awful lot of peace.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be bloody.
Yeah. Something that really helps me with that, shift my perspective, which, coming back to that perspective piece, is when I went to Africa, that was one of my biggest eye-opening moments of my own self-discovery, is that coming from a background of so many attachments to things and possessions, and trying to chase happiness and joy and fulfillment, and trying to be seen and heard and all these things that felt like they were missing in my life. When I went to Africa and was going through the slums, which is what they call it, is really being aware that there was, a family of 9 living in this tiny little shed that was, maybe like 3 by 3 meters, if that. And what really brought so much peace to my heart, and embarrassment of who I was in the moment as well, which was necessary for my journey, was kids playing on the street with rocks, and they looked so much happier than anyone I knew at the time. And I just looked at that and I thought, they, from my observation of this scenario, what I would see them as having nothing possession-wise and materialistically, were the happiest people and had connection. They needed to rely on one another to create survival. They needed to connect with each other to feel safe and feel seen and feel protected. And it just blows my mind, because you can go across the globe and you can have these experiences and really learn the different perspectives and way of living and beliefs that people have created, that they weren't doom and gloom. They were actually like, yeah, life's pretty sweet, because they had in their mind what they needed to be happy. And then I find, like, myself, like, looking outside of myself for so many things, opposed to just actually deciding in the moment, like, what do I choose to really be grateful for and appreciative of that already exists in my reality, opposed to chasing and seeking this thing outside of me. So yeah, I just found that really interesting, because we all have our own battles, we all have our own thing, which is what you so beautifully put together. And we get to explore that. Yeah. And then be changed by other people's understandings of life as well.
Yeah. And travel did the same for me. And I love that you brought that up, because if you haven't traveled or you haven't seen other cultures or experiences, like, it can be so easy to get in this box of first world, everything that we have, and it becomes normal, and therefore it becomes kind of an annoyance. Like, why hasn't my food arrived at the time it was supposed to? Like, first world problems, right? And it's so incredible. We have this, and we were born into our bodies, we were born into our lives, our parents, our communities, our societies, for a reason. Like, for some reason, you and I weren't born in the slums in Africa. We were born into these bodies, and so we get to do the best we can with that, right? But I was the same. Like, I lived in Nicaragua for a while, in India, Bali, of course, and being able to, like, I lived with people who lived there. I didn't do the tourist thing because I had no money at the time. So I lived in
what a gift.
It was the same. Like, it took a while for it to land, but it's like the woman selling mango in a plastic bag on the side of the road was so lovely and so happy. We spoke none of the same language, but we had this great relationship. And the grandma that I lived with in Bali, we spoke none of the same language, but she, like, taps me on the bum every time she sees me and gives me a hug. And same with India, I remember seeing the men on the side of the roads at the end of the day coming together and just sitting on the side of the road, having a chai and talking. I was like, that's so beautiful. Like, and that's a daily thing that happens. Whereas that, we kind of all just retreat to our homes in our boxes and turn on the box and from a box and all the things, right? So yeah, I think it's one of the most incredible things to do, is to get out into the world, whether that's outside your front door or outside of the country.
That's a start, hey?
Yeah, right?
That's a great first step.
Maybe they're awesome. Maybe they're not. And one way or another, you learn something.
Yes. So well said.
Yeah. So you run a beautiful community called Sisterhood. Tell me, what do you think? I'm probably will be the identity piece. And I'm curious about the answer, is the biggest opportunity for women in the world at the moment that you're seeing and witnessing?
Yeah, such a beautiful question. It's interesting, Kat, because my intention with building this business has probably shifted a little bit since I've actually come into the business. And this is like what I was saying before, was that we learn through others as much as we're learning internally all the time. And so the intention was to create a space where women are learning, growing, and training together. So we include movement, breathwork, meditation, and connection. And the reason for that is, if we look at the different facets and dimensions of life, they all hold their place. And so my gorgeous business partner, Tia, her passions lie around fitness and health. And that's something I'm passionate about. But it's also not what I spent all of my life studying and, looking into. I've looked into personal development in frames of like human behavior and connection, and why people do the things they do, and why do they think the way they think. And mindset's held a huge part of that. And also meditation and breath work is regulating the nervous system. And so these seemingly basic concepts that we came together to create a business out of have just evolved in this whole other depth of understanding. And the beautiful thing we've found here is something that Tia actually always says to me is, you can do hard things. And I think as a woman, I am learning more and more about the importance of standing up, speaking up, and sharing. And I know that from my life experience personally, I am who I am because of the leaders and the people that have come into my space that have encouraged me to step up. I didn't naturally have that installed in me from a young age, not growing up in necessarily what felt like at the time an unsupportive dynamic within the family. And that's not true to this day. That's just how I felt in the moment. And so I didn't really know what it was to have confidence, or to build myself, or be empowered, or know that I had a right to speak and I had a right to do things that were outside my comfort zone. And what we've really found, Tia, my business partner, and I, is that we've removed our ego from the business. It's like, it's actually not our business anymore. In the start, we were like, oh, sisterhood, our business and our community and things like that. And when I started removing the ego from the business and decided that we were going to create a platform that was co-created by the women that came into the space, we found that more women found more empowerment through the identity, that they realized they were a part of the community. They were building the community with us. And we found so much freedom in allowing women to be their full selves, their full soul expression, everything and all parts of themselves that perhaps they have not felt safe to expose or express, or to be seen in, or to be heard in, or to be loved in, or to be held in, that they are finding empowerment through their own identity within that space. And although Tia and I are leaders of the community, we're also showing women how they are also leaders of their own life, and how what they have brought into their existence, how they have created the identity that is them, is when they actually accept those parts of themselves, the most beautiful thing happens. Like, they'll put their hand up to express something in a sister circle, and you can feel all of this shame or this guilt or this embarrassment from what they're sharing. And then when they've let it go and they see a whole circle of women that are like, yeah, me too, or I resonate, I've had this experience, it's like you can see it in their body, that they just find this peace in their heart of, I've actually been accepted and loved and seen for the first time. And what I found to be so magical from that is that the community that's being co-created by all of these beautiful women that are a part of it, that's the safety zone. This is the space where we actually get to, for some of the women, be seen for the first time in what they were expressing. They've held on to this thing for so long, and all of a sudden it's gone. So I think the opportunity within sisterhood and community in general, whether it's what we do or what another community is doing, is the ability to let go and come to full acceptance. Like, before we start to judge what's happened in our life, or the parts of us that we hold this shame piece around, is to actually discover, well, what purpose has it played? Like, in this instant, I am who I am because of what's happened in the past. In the sense, it's taught me what it's taught me. So if we were to show gratitude and acceptance around that, how would we feel then? And so a huge part of that is, I won't go too much into like the kind of quantum side of it, but if we even just look at emotions from a surface level, it's like these emotions have certain frequencies. And if we're dancing around shame, blame, and resentment and anger and fear, which happens, I experience it still today. Like, I'm human, we're all human.
Good in the
We have it
moment.
at different levels. Yeah. Like, yeah, I was like irritated last night because I was tired. I'm like, I'm not going to judge myself. I'm just going to be in the emotion so I can learn to shift it as well. But when we actually start to transition and elevate these emotions to a higher elevation, a higher frequency, that is like a journey within itself. But when we judge and we attach to these things, because we're like, I can't be seen, I can't show this, I can't talk about this, we stay here. And that's the resistance to actually lean into those things. And I think with women's work, it's, you know, there are a lot of sister wounds that come up. There are a lot of women that, even over the weekend, you know, we had a beautiful woman there that was pregnant, and just watching the relationship of her with her womb and knowing there was life that was being created in the womb. A lot of women came up and were like, I'm feeling really triggered because I'm starting to realize that my relationship with my mom was X, Y, and Z, or I didn't feel loved and I didn't feel supported. And I really love them expressing that. And I also love when they can come to an understanding of knowing they can create that for themselves now. And that the journey of not having that up until this point has led them into, you know, if I look at that and I look at, I was unsupported or unloved, and which was what my story was in the past, not that that was my parents' intentions, that was my understanding of it. And so now I'm like, oh, but then I went to be a rebel, and, you know, I was so rebellious and went against the grain of life and was called the black sheep of the family. And I felt so separate from my family. I went and created a life of my own. And that was the blessing within that. So we think it's really like in women's space, when you have safety, you have connection, you have support, and you're able to move through, you know, if you haven't felt safe with women before, like, this is a place to do that. You know, my journey is actually with men. I feel so safe and supported with women now. I'm still learning safety with the masculine. And so I love being vulnerable in that space and also working through that with women. But I also know there's a lot of work I need to go and do around that area too. And it is a decision and it needs to be backed by action. But I feel when you have the support and the energetic exchanges around you happening, where you actually feel backed, potentially for the first time, you find that within yourself as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's one of the things that I teach when I teach about communication, because as women, so women and men have totally different communication needs on a hormonal chemical level, as before anything else, before any of society's rules come into play. So actually, like, and funny enough, they're geared against each other. Like, men go and have their cave or their shed or whatever and have time out when they've got stuff going on. Women actually need to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, because the more we talk, the more we clear. And then we get our intuition dropping in with like, oh, here's your solution. Here's the next step. And in relationships, it's like, well, the man doesn't want to hear, because as soon as he hears you're upset, he's going into fix it mode and he needs to go to the shed to try and fix it. He's not listening. You're not listening to me. And so when we can learn that maybe our partner can't hold that right now, but we could go to women's groups, we could go to circles so that we can just talk. We don't need the advice. We don't need anything else in return. It's just get it out. And then it's out and you can move forward. And I love what you touched on about, you said it a couple of times about family and the expectations around our parents or whatever the family dynamic was. And I'm noticing in, again, our industries, there is a lot going on in some areas where it's like there's this new rule book that's come out about how parents should be.
Yes. Oh God.
Though, because it didn't exist then. So in the healing journey, there's a lot of, well, wait, you should have had this from your parents, or you should have felt like this from your parents, except no one taught your parents or their parents how to be parents. They were literally doing the best they could, usually under very stressful circumstances, right? So I had a very similar thing where I wanted to turn on my family for not being what they were supposed to be. Except, and it made me, I was in an echo chamber of, oh my God, they're horrible people. And I was only able to think of the things in my childhood that were horrible. And it like drowned out all of the amazingness that my childhood.
Totally, Kat.
And so there's a lot of that going on. And it's, if anyone's like, there's a great quote by J.K. Rowling, and she's like, there is an expiry date on blaming your parents for the things that you have going on in your life.
Thank God. Thank God. I love that so much. It's so incredibly beautiful.
And it's
because,
like, it's the blame piece, right? Like, if we find someone to blame, it's a quick hit for the brain and it keeps us in a problem. But what if you could solve that problem and mend relationships? Like my relationship with my parents now, through that phase, and in what this is going to segue beautifully into my next question, and the boundaries and the strategies that I created with my parents.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful now. And I get to just remember all of the awesome things that they did throughout all of the challenges that they had. And, you know, that's possible for everyone. Anyone who's listening to this or watching this as well.
Beautiful, Kat.
And I love how you talk about boundaries. It's become another hot topic in the world of late. And a lot of people seem to think that it's about putting up a wall against something that doesn't feel good. And instead you refer to it more as a fence with a gate. And I had this, what I was just saying, this experience with my parents a few years ago, where I had built up this whole story that they were the problem that I had to remove or put a wall up against. And I was being encouraged by psychologists never to talk to your parents again. You don't have to.
Wow.
It's happening a lot in psychology rooms, interestingly enough. But instead, as I moved through finding the tools, I got to identify, okay, here's the behaviors of my parents that aren't serving me in conversation or interaction, because they're just solidifying stuff that I don't want to carry forward. So I got to say, hey, Mom, like, I love you. When you complain about things, I'm going to stop you, or I'm going to have to end the conversation. Or like, Dad, like when you start to lecture me on things that you don't have experience in, I may have to stop you, because I just want to talk about the future. And I want to talk about what's working for you guys and what you're excited about. And also I get them to tell me stories of their past, good stories, which has been so beautiful, because I set some ground rules for all of us so that we don't just fall into those unconscious programs of complaining, or, oh, this is happening in the world, or, oh, this happened this week, because it's so easy when we don't have ground rules. And now every conversation, like, even they would never call me, I always had to call them, and I'd be like, guys, you gotta start calling me. This is a rule now. And so now they call me at least once a week, which is so beautiful. And you get to actually create those fences with the gate. And I'd love for you to speak into the subject of boundaries and your experience with it and how that's evolved.
Thank you so much for this question. And I've actually, we've had a conversation around this as well. And this was one of the weakest areas of my life. And it's so funny, because I had a coach and mentor for 5 years, and oh, it's just because you're lacking boundaries, just because you're lacking boundaries. And I was like, oh my God, why am I not ready to learn this lesson? Like, I don't understand. I just keep repeating the behavior. And I feel like the lack of boundaries I had within myself and the world around me was because, I mean, I can go back into class and say it was never displayed to me. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't understand. And then as an adult, I actually learned through watching other people model boundaries to me, feeling that rejection come up, feeling all these icky feelings come up when people would place boundaries on me. And I just had to lean into that. I had to understand why those feelings were there in the first place. Why was I so reactive to boundaries? I still get reactive to boundaries, to be honest, and I still get uncomfortable placing them. But I do know that there is way more freedom on the other side of boundaries. And what I love about what you just shared is you become the leader. What I heard in your story was you become the leader of boundaries. You don't expect and wait for other people to be the example of boundaries. You can teach people what that looks like. You can show them what that looks like, because other people did that for me. It's made it easier for me now, still challenging, but easier than it was in the past to be able to do this now. And something I have found is a lot more respect for boundaries. So many different examples I can think of, but one that comes to mind is my business partner, Tia. Like, she is so good at boundaries. And I love it when she sets a boundary with me, because it calls me into higher action and higher responsibility. And there are parts of me, there are definitely parts of me that are like, responsibility, like, no thanks. I don't want to do that. I just want to be a big kid today, which is a huge part of my playful personality. And when responsibilities and boundaries are put in place, I'm like, that's boring. I don't like this. I just want to do what I want to do and you're not letting me. And I get into this complex teenage mode of like, F you, like I'm out. And then when I reflect, I'm like, no, I actually have a lot of respect for boundaries now. So I think with boundaries, something that I have found is there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of beautiful pieces of content, but I also find a lot of peace in finding what a boundary is for you. And coming back to the analogy of, there's the wall that we put up, and a lot of us, well, I know I used to think that a wall was a boundary and it separated me from the other person, and I didn't like it. I don't enjoy disconnect. I prefer that I have safety within myself, someone else has safety within themselves, and we're able to find what works for both of us. And walls used to feel like so much of a strong barrier that I just didn't feel like that person wanted to like connect with me anymore. Versus having an actual fence around, if you were in a house and your house is your body and your house is your soul expression, and you know what feels good for you and you know what doesn't feel good for you, or maybe you're still figuring that, and that's okay as well. But when you have a fence around the house, it's not shutting people out. You can see through the fence, people can see in if you choose to have a fence like that, but you are in control of the gate that's at the front of the fence. And this gate is your yes and it's your no. And so if you know that you have the key to the gate, you get to decide when people present things to you, am I okay with this? Am I in an energetic state to be in that space right now? And knowing if it's a yes or a no. Now, I work a lot with intuitive. So my intuition. So when I'm in my intuitive state, I'm like, it's easy for me to go yes or no. It's hard for me to communicate it, sorry, but it's easy for me to know. And every time I've ignored that is when I'm affected. And other people are probably affected as well. But something that we worked through the women with over the weekend was we created guidelines for what we wanted the weekend to look like. We created certain expectations of if you're going to commit to something, you're committed. If you're not going to commit, don't commit. That's it. That's completely fine. But we really spoke into that you have the power and control for your yeses and nos. No one in the world can dictate whether it's a yes or a no for you. They can guide you. They can show examples of what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like. But you, at the end of the day, are the one that's in control of your vessel, in the control of your reality. You get to say yes and you get to say no. So something that was beautiful was when we presented to the women, hey, in the morning, we're going to do Pilates, or we're going to do some breath work, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that. What I loved is that some women were like, I don't feel like that right now. And I'm like, cool, what do you feel like? And they were able to express with a sense of freedom and courage and empowerment, I actually just want to stay in bed. And I'm like, great, do you want to be challenged on that? Or does that feel really true for you? Yep, it feels really true for me. Awesome, we'll see you in an hour. And that to me is just incredible, because I feel we grow up in a system, and might be going too much on a different topic now, but it kind of does reflect on boundaries, is that we grow up in systems where we have to be told when to stand, when to sit, when to go to the bathroom. And for me, that is kind of like a huge disrespect to boundaries, because that's like, feels to me like dictatorship of you have to do this and that. And then I think we actually lack boundaries through that life experience. And that's probably the rebel in me that was like growing up as a naughty teenager, was like, nope, I'm not doing what you say because I want to do things on my terms. And I actually think that's a really healthy energy. It's still having respect that people are allowed to have certain ways of living, but knowing what's actually true for you as well, and finding harmony in the balance. So yeah, boundaries are incredible, but they also don't have to block everything out.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's such a, like, we've gotten to a point with women, especially, where we don't know how to ask for what we want, or we don't think that we're allowed, or we think that we're going to upset the guy that we're seeing, or our husband, or our boss, or whatever. And yet in the not asking for what we want and sharing that and creating that, then we're almost going into like a covert contract of like, well, they should just know that I want this. And it gets really, really messy. And asking for what you want is such a powerful thing to start challenging your own programming. I love that. And even when it comes to having people and conversations and situations in your life that make you uncomfortable, you get to have like a permission piece before you go into things as well. Like, I remember I worked for a big company for many years who had a great training program of how we'd communicate with each other. And there was always if I needed to come and have a talk to you about something that was bothering me, or whatever the context was, it was, hey, is now a good time to have a conversation? Is now a good time to give you feedback? so that they could go, hey, look, you know what? My dad just died, so now's not a good time, or whatever was going on for them. Like, I'm not quite ready to receive your feedback right now, or have a conversation about our relationship right now, but let's do it here.
Yeah.
Like, being able to have that come into play in our interactions as well, because you can actually ask for things to happen in a time or a place that you're ready and prepared for it. If you're not, like, so then we take out all of the, I wasn't ready for the fight that we just had, or whatever it was.
And sometimes life just happens. Sometimes we don't have an opportunity to place a boundary and life smacks you in the face, and we get to learn as well. Something I find really interesting is also checking in with, are you placing a boundary or are you avoiding something? Because I've made the mistake in the past. It's not a mistake, it's just a thing that I've experienced of, instead of placing a boundary, or I'm using a boundary as an opportunity to avoid something. And I did this last night, and my business partner called me out, something external to us. And she's like, you're actually just not leaning in because you don't want to. That's not a boundary. That's you avoiding something. And I was like, I hate that you're right now, because I really don't want to lean into that discomfort after this amazing weekend, and I don't want to deal with this right now. But I was actually, it's not that I wasn't energetically prepared to, it's that I was avoiding it. So I think that's an important question to ask ourselves too. When you're placing a boundary, are you avoiding? Are you waiting for something to shift in yourself first before you're ready to deal with the thing? Or is it just you actually knowing, yeah, I've been here before and I know what works for me and what doesn't? So yeah, that was an interesting piece that came out last night too. So I just wanted to add that little.
I'm glad you did. And I could rabbit hole on that alone.
Yeah,
and I want to be mindful about time because I have a couple more questions, but tell me, why sisterhood? Why is that important?
Oh, it's literally, thank you for that question. It has felt like the greatest life journey for myself, and also just connection. I'd never realized how important it was for me and for others. And what's been really beautiful is Tia and I coming together and co-creating this. We had two separate reasons that why we wanted sisterhood, why we wanted this business, why we wanted this community. Coming into that, we have just discovered so many other facets and depth of our understanding of life, and also other women have done the same. So the importance of it, I think, for me, is connection, is learning how to be vulnerable and opening up. I mean, we can be vulnerable with ourselves, but when you do it in front of people too, I find it far more daunting, actually. And I just think, allowing that space and the openness within that space is allowing people to discover themselves, for us to discover ourselves as we're on the journey with these beautiful women as well. But it's creating a safe space. As in, some people feel so unsafe in their world of, not feeling like they've had things they needed, they wanted, and forgetting that they can create it. So that ideally, we want to be able to create something that helps women have the tools and the skill sets to go on with their life's journey, having safety within themselves. And I think that's created with community in a massive way as well. I know for me, not feeling safe for so long, I had to learn it. I had to have it modeled to me, nearly like I was reparenting myself through other people. And I love that. I love that that's my journey. And I love that we get to now do this with women.
And I ask everyone this question because it was a question that really started things off for me years ago. And it's because, and you touched on it actually in the beginning, about being a leader of your own life. Because I truly believe that we've put leaders on a pedestal, and they're the leaders of the world or the leaders of the community. And we're all leading, whether we're leading ourselves or a child or, a whole corporation. I'd love to hear, what does leadership mean to you?
Yeah, leadership has really shifted for me. So I feel like I've always had leadership qualities most of my life. And I know that leaders lead in different ways. So to identify what leadership means to an individual is the most important thing. Because I find if I was to share, this is what leadership means to me, it's like people are going to have totally different approaches to leadership. And I love that it's so different. I used to lead a lot I've had situations where I've led a lot from the front and I've been more of a controlling leader. What I've learned lately is actually leading from behind, but also knowing there are times I need to step forth and be an example piece, so that stepping into my vulnerability of expression in fears or things that are seemingly uncomfortable, so that women then feel more comfortable to be able to do that within themselves. So I think there are elements, and there are times where you lead from the front. There are also times when you lead from the back. There are also times when you stand by your sister's side and you hold her hand and you go, I've got you, until you have yourself. And so it comes up in different ways for me. I've always found that if I'm not also leading in my own private life of going to the depths of my truth, I'm not showing up in the way that I would desire in the community as well. And I really feel so honored that I get to do that. There are things that come up and are petrifying, and I'm like, I'm so proud that I'm here, because if I wasn't being challenged, then again, if there's nothing to overcome, there's nothing to become. And I think it takes true leadership to lean into the discomfort of life and go, great, that's a perfect opportunity to learn something. That's a perfect obstacle for me to learn how to jump higher. So yeah, leadership is definitely a strong value in sisterhood. And because we work with so many different personality types, people find freedom in leaning from behind and leaning from the front, but we love to challenge them as well, or give them the opportunity to learn both, to really know what is true for them as well.
This has been so much fun.
I know. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I've learned so much about you as well. And I think before we started recording, I said, I really am excited to what I get to learn about you through this, because I watch you on social media and I'm just like, some of the points that you make, I love when there's deep truth in things, and when people say the things that are seemingly uncomfortable for others to hear because it's something that they get to learn through. I love that you always speak so much truth, and I'm just so proud and inspired by your bravery to speak up. And so to be here and learn so much about you on this call as well has just been, so beautiful to witness.
Yeah. Oh, bless. And we've only scraped, like, I feel like we could have gone on for hours on some of these subjects.
Look, if we didn't have other things to do today, we could have made that happen. But exactly. There'll be other opportunities, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And for those who want to connect with Laura and learn about sisterhood, or even to learn from her about how to build a sisterhood community, perhaps of your own, if you're not local, then I will put all her details in the show notes. You can connect with her and pick her brain. And until then, we will catch you all time.
Thank you, beautiful. This has been amazing.
If you like that episode, then make sure that you click here to check out some of the other conversations with my amazing guests and friends. And if you really liked it, you can click here to subscribe so that you get notified each time a new episode goes up. And you can click down here to share it with your friends if there's something that they might also like to know. See you next time, lovely.